In this video, I'm going to look at an HTML page that has an SVG, Scalable Vector Graphics element, and that is going to be populated by some JavaScript. It's going to make a design based on the artwork by Victor Vasarely that you sort of see here. So here is let me refresh it. Here is what the code makes, sort of somewhat reminiscent of what the work by Vasarely, that is the inspiration. Okay. So let's minimize that. And let's get a move on here. So we have the HTML page. There is some basic style centering. I have a variable in the CSS called half_size, and that's with this colon root thing here. And then I'm using that in turn to style the SVG, giving it both its width and height. And that uses this method var and calc. Here is the HTML, the header of the page, the SVG that is empty, and everything else is, because you can see when I collapse the script tag, everything else is script. Okay, I am making a string variable here. I should be let. Probably should be constant for us, strictly speaking. This is the sort of URL that is expanding the namespace that when I'm creating elements to add to the SVG, that they are sort of known what they are. Okay. 20 is this constant, and I think that is sort of how many cells I have going across, both up and down. I have a variable n that's going to, I'm sort of going to count, sort of go from 0 to num times num. And so this is going to sort of be at the end. So n is going to sort of count up. As you saw, we were sort of adding sort of circle by circle until there are num squared circles. So I'm starting it at num squared. So I'm sort of, in some sense, starting it at the end, so it will restart. I have a timer. I'm using set interval down here to set the timer ID. I usually have a timer ID even when I'm not stopping the timer. The sort of main purpose of the timer ID is to stop the timer. Sometimes I will, if I'm having trouble with a code, I may stop the timer as a debugging method, or and just as sort of a habit, I usually declare a timer ID when I have a timer. The H here is for the hue. I'm working in a color model, a Hue-Saturation-Lightness, an HSL color model. And this is telling me the H is for the hue, and sat here is for the saturation. M here is I'm going to the style and getting that half size value. And here I'm stripping off the unit, so it was pixels, but M, so M is just going to be a number. It's going to be that 300. And then I'm also getting from the M to M is then the full size, and divide that by num. That's the cell size. So I have this A, which is the size of my cell. All right, here I am using set interval, and I'm going to call a method I call CTA every 33 milliseconds. And so then here's the function CTA. And if n is equal to num times num, which it was when I started, then I sort of like refresh the page. So I clear out any inner HTML that I had in my SVG. I reset num back to -1, could be 0, or I think 0 would have been fine. If I set it to num -1, then I'm probably wasting one time segment or something. Here I'm changing the hue. The hue is in this color model, is a degree, so it's out of 360 degree. And I'm choosing a random amount of saturation, somewhere between 25 and 100. And then I am creating the color based on that hue and that saturation. The saturation and the lightness are percentages, so they need that percent sign. And then I'm going to make a rectangle that starts at 0, 0 and is width of 2m, which is the whole width, and a height of 2m, the whole height, and color that color I just made, and adding it. So that is right now this sort of pea green that you just saw there. That was that big rectangle. Okay. And that's only when that stuff only occurs when I get sort of num times num, when I fill the whole page. So down here, when I fill the whole page and I'm ready to start anew, then I clear everything out. So that was this n equal num star num. Okay. Otherwise, down here I increment n. But otherwise, I'm getting I and j. I'm taking my n and I'm taking the modulus with num, and I'm going to say that that's my column. And I'm getting a j value by dividing n by m and getting the integer value using parseInt. That's going to be the row I'm in. So I'm getting the column and the row I am in. I am establishing the color once again based on my H. This is the same hue and the same saturation as above. But now what I'm doing is I'm varying the lightness. So these are kind of monochromatic, and then the variation that you see is a variation in the lightness. So it's dark around, light in the center and dark going around. And that is this sort of calculation here. And I have some absolute value with involving I and j. And so that is giving me the sort of concentric squares, that the hue depends on these concentric squares. So that's the calculation there. And then I'm making a circle, an SVG circle. I'm giving it a center X and a center Y. I'm adding a half because it's the center. I'm giving it a radius of half the cell size, A2. I'm filling it with that color. Again, the same hue, the same saturation, just the lightness varying. I gave it a stroke. And so you see it here with the stroke. The original work probably looks more like it doesn't have a stroke. So if you wanted it to look more like the actual work by Vasarely, then take out the stroke. But there's a spot here where the background color and the color of the circle are very close. And that's sort of why I liked the stroke. I can make the stroke, I mean, I made the stroke black, so it's very prominent. I could have probably made it a little less prominent, but I think I liked it with the stroke, so I kept the stroke in. And then I added the page and the increment of my n, and then again, so I'm moving through each time adding one circle in a particular row and column, and sort of the next row or column. And then when I made a full design, blank it out and start again. All right, I think that's all I wanted to show you for this one. Thanks for your attention.